Additional support for workers, businesses and households impacted by COVID-19 in Singapore will be announced on Thursday. Deputy Prime Minister Heng Swee Keat will deliver a ministerial statement in Parliament. Advanced GDP estimates for the first quarter of the year will be released on the same day. Mr. Heng says the supplementary budget will help Singaporeans stay united and resilient. He says it will keep them safe, it will preserve jobs and livelihoods, as well as keeping viable enterprises strong. Mr. Heng says it comes just 5 weeks after the national budget highlighting just how fast the situation has deteriorated. Let's take a look then at what's happened since the first support package worth $6.4 billion was announced. At the time, the major COVID-19 hotspot was China. The country accounted for 72,000 cases of the global total of about 73,000. There were also 1,800 deaths back then. Fast forward about 5 weeks, and it's now a global problem. There are nearly 330,000 infections across the world. 14,500 people have died. About half of all the infections are in Europe, which has emerged as the new epicenter of the virus. In Singapore, it's gone from 80 cases on the 18th of February to more than 450 as of yesterday. 2 people here have died. And the global problem has hit Singapore hard. Just today, Singapore Airlines slashed 96% of its capacity up to the end of April. Last month, even before the situation worsened, authorities had projected as much as a 30% drop in visitor arrivals this year. It's unclear how the current situation changes that estimate. On the stock market, Singapore's benchmark Straits Times Index has lost over 30% of its value year to date. In fact, the economic fallout can be felt across nearly all sectors, pointing to the urgency of additional support measures. During the SARS crisis 17 years ago, the government unveiled a $230 million relief package aimed at the hardest hit tourism and transport sectors. About 5 years after that, the global financial crisis struck and $2.9 billion was set aside to help workers and businesses cope with the downturn. When things got worse, another $20.5 billion was injected to help companies access credit, preserve jobs and upgrade workers' skills. About a quarter of that package's value came from Singapore's reserves. Now, those reserves could come in handy once again, according to an economist. He says it could contribute about half of a package that could total up to $16 billion.
We do expect the Singapore economy to dip into a full-year contraction of minus 0.5%. Now, this is certainly a lot deeper compared to the SARS, because during SARS, Singapore still managed to register, a fairly robust growth of 4.5%. And it will also be more painful than the global financial crisis period, because during the global financial crisis period, the economy still managed a 0.1% growth. Essentially, this time around, it is certainly a lot deeper than SARS and more painful than the global financial crisis. The consequence is that you could see retrenchment numbers picking up. Companies may have to cease their operations, especially for those with weaker financial standings. So the second stimulus package has to pack more punch. So the scope of this second package will also be broadened to cover the entire economy and no longer just about some specific industry that are relatively more badly affected. So it will be an economy-wide response to the impact of this COVID-19 outbreak. The feedback from some of the earlier policy measures is that the effects takes a longer time to get to the ground. So I think perhaps a more immediate kind of response measures would be more effective. So a direct cash grants to the companies rather than to depend on rebates, property tax rebates, for which comes later, pertaining to individuals. The segments that is most prone to retrenchment based on the historical data over the past few years are the middle income skilled workers. These are essentially the PMETs, the professionals. And they have been contributing to the tax cover. Even though you may be retrenched, you still have to pay for the taxes of the income earned in the previous year. So I do expect that potentially maybe we can even consider deferring the tax payments for those retrenched workers. I think this will be of significant help to them in the event that they are being displaced.